Welcome back to the Day Camp Podcast. This is Andy Pritikin, director of Liberty Lake in the Philly suburbs, New Jersey. And we are joined today from two of my camp colleague brothers, Sam Borek from Woodmont Day Camp and Gregg Licht from Elmwood. How's it going, guys?
It is great,
Going
Andy.
well,
We're
Andy.
We just
happy
jump
to be
in.
here.
We just
That's
jump in
it.
right into the deep end,
Let's
baby.
go, ready to roll.
All right. This is the podcast where we just cut out the intros and all that kind
No
of stuff.
appetizers. Go to the main
Put some
entree.
meat on the freaking bone. All right. That's
Done.
what we do here. All right.
This is the most excited I have been in a very long time.
Yeah. So
being on the Day Camp Pod is huge for me.
That's awesome. But unfortunately, Gregg says, I'm so excited about this. The most exciting thing is that I get to finally meet Sam Thompson. And unfortunately, Sam is not with us today. Her elderly mom passed away, and they are doing all that fine stuff. And Sam, you're in our thoughts. All right. And just know, one of your big fans here. You're going to have to make it to Tri-State one day, Sam, so you could actually meet Gregg. Sam is big at ACA National, but is still trying to get the Crystal Lake Park Authority or whatever it is that she works for to pay for her to come out to Atlantic City. I think they think she's just going to gamble. So so today's topic is going to be about transitioning leadership because both Gregg and Sam took over existing camps, and that's a really, really interesting thing. But before we get into that, we're going to talk a little bit about pipeline stuff because my son Justin and a lot of the contemporaries, the 20 and 30-year-olds and Jack Schott and all, they've been very focused recently about, there's just no easy way for young people to get a shot. To become a camp director or, own a camp and all that kind of thing. And, I understand it's not easy, but I also think it's a lot of hogwash in a way, because I think that if you're motivated enough and you pick up the phone or you show up and do things and you volunteer, I think there's lots of ways in. So we're going to ask, we'll start with Sam. And, you could talk about like how your little background, how you got to be sitting in the captain's chair right there.
Look, I think the main word that you said was easy, because they're right. There's no easy way in.
No.
But it doesn't mean there isn't a way.
Yeah. And we're in a day and age where I could pick up my phone right now and do a zillion things.
Correct.
And just get it done. Right.
And the one part they have right is that what's different about our industry, and I think we can all agree on this, is there are a finite number of jobs. So if you are a computer programmer, you can put your resume out all over the country, and there are people that can hire you for computer programming. Right. Camps have a limited number of full-time positions. So they're right in the sense that it's not easy to walk into a full-time position, but it can happen. So Cliff Notes version of me went to camp growing up, stopped when I was 15 or 17, thought I was going to be done, met someone who owns a camp in Maine. He said, come work for the summer. I did. And then it took me 4.5 years to get a full-time job. And what I did in that time is my first summer, I was there just for the summer. Then I was there from May to August. Then I was there from January. Then I was hired January to August. Then I was finally hired full time. But in between, I was waiting tables. I was cold calling for sales. I was a mediator in small claims court. I was living on my friend's couch for 4 months in Manhattan to get to camp. So the point that they're making is accurate in that you can't just show up and get a job day one. What I tell young people is you got to pay your dues, in the sense that no one's going to hire you full time without seeing what you could do during the summer. Because the work from September to May, let's just be totally honest, is not that incredibly challenging. It's work, and there's hours involved, and there's sales, and there's a lot of balls to juggle. But your true value for any staff member is June to August. Who can handle the pressure of that time, of 18-hour days, or stresses that come up from a bus breakdown or kids getting hurt, or whatever it may be. So you have to put your time in, and it may take 2, 3, 4 years. And I think for today, that seems hard, because people want to show up and say, I'm ready. One of my friends has a great line, which today's youth is underqualified, but willing to start at the top. So I'm ready to be a camp director, right? I was a group counselor last summer. My group was awesome. I could do your job. I could be a director. Let me in.
So knowing a couple of details about your thing that you didn't disclose is
Yeah,
that two things. One of them is that in that time they were waiting tables and stuff you're talking about, you also got your law degree. Okay, so
correct.
you were getting, you were getting schooled also in
Yes,
important transferable skills, which I
yes,
think is awesome. And I always tell people, whether it's an education degree or or a master's or whatever, because
yeah,
you could have an undergraduate degree or whatever. My son got a human organizational development, it's basically a camp director degree. It's amazing. But and then secondarily, the camp owner person that you chose to sort of align with and throw your chips in a little bit, you knew that this was an entrepreneurial person that was
correct.
that had the potential to take on people and expand and buy more camps and all that kind of thing too, right?
Yeah. And the best is when your mother looks at you and says, all right, so you have a law degree. You're going to go work 4 months of the year at a sleepaway camp. What the hell is wrong with you? And you're going to trust this guy that you don't know from Adam, that he tells you that if you keep working, eventually there'll be a full-time job. When's eventually? And I'm like,
Right.
wow,
The slick guy in a fancy car.
correct. I'm like, I don't know, but I feel like this is a good opportunity. And it went from, as I said, 3 months to 4 months to six
Right.
months to 8 months to a year.
Right. And I think the big word that I use all the time when I talk about this with people is risk. You have
Correct.
to be willing to take risk.
Yeah,
And it's easier to do when you were at that stage, Sam,
100%.
right? Than if you fast forwarded 15 years and you were married with 2 kids,
That's right.
right? Then
Single,
it
no
becomes
kids.
virtually impossible at that
That's
point,
right. So
right?
living on a couch for months and not having to not having to worry about those responsibilities, that's the time to do it. 20 to 28, 29, when you're in that window of just I think the point you made earlier, Andy, with Justin and Jack and whomever, if it's something you really want, you can achieve it. You just have to work for it and you have to be patient. And I think that today, patience is not a virtue. I think that
Yeah.
most of the expectation is, I want it to happen now. I'm ready. Make it
Yeah.
happen.
Well, when Skip and Ben were telling me to be patient, I sort of wanted to punch him in the face. But yeah, I get it.
Yes,
I get it.
correct. And by the way, it took me 10 years to be a camp director, right? From the time that
Right.
I started my camp career as an adult, not
Mhm.
not working as a 17-year-old counselor. It took 10 years and lots of failed opportunities that I thought were going to happen, that
Right.
were really close to happening, that never materialized. And I know
Risk.
that was the same for Greg.
Right.
Yeah,
You took a lot of risks, right?
yeah.
It was awesome. Greg Licht.
One thing that I will say is that failing is just part of this. The amount of camps that I was supposed to lead and then all of a sudden not lead. It's just part of this, and you have to be able to embrace that rejection. I'm lucky in that I came from a theater background, which is, you spend
All
99%
rejection.
of your
Improv.
time being
Improv.
rejected.
Improv.
That's right. I'm really good at being rejected. But I believe that opportunities are out there. There are a couple of core beliefs that I have. The first is you gotta just be there. To me, FaceTime is the most important thing. I believe one of the reasons I am successful is not because I am so smart or even that good at this. It's that I'm always willing to be the first person there in the morning and the last
Yep.
person to leave at night. And that shows something to your leader. The other piece that to me is incredibly important is that you have to say yes. So there is going to be a time that you're going to get an opportunity that you don't necessarily feel is right for you at this particular time. But if the goal is to have your own camp, just say yes. Just say yes. Can you come join us and help move these buses today? Just say yes. It's a Saturday afternoon. You had
Yeah.
other plans, but your vision is to be a camp director. You got to say yes.
You got to
This
commit.
is, everybody knows what the summer is like, as Sam mentioned. We want people to be there all the time. That's the beauty of this work. And I think yes is just a really important answer.
And
Yeah.
if I can add one thing that you said earlier about just aligning yourself with the right people, we've been at Woodmont now 16 years. So many of our full-time staff have become either camp directors or leaders at other places because of the relationships that are built by being in a really good operation. So people who work with us full-time, if they have an opportunity and it's not at Woodmont, we encourage them to take it. We connect them to other people. We encourage them to interview. If there's a job open that's out there and it's not at Woodmont, because I'm not ready to retire yet, then I'm going to support you because it's important to grow.
Right.
Sam, it's a huge point. And I will also say, I think largely my success is based on the amount of volunteering that I did with camps that had nothing to do that were my actual camp, right? I met so many wonderful people and serving on tri-state and different committees. Those things mattered. Like that's where my relationship started from, and to me is a big driver behind my success.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt about it. And you know, Sam, that attitude, that sort of like people that work for us, we're sort of training them to leave us, right? That is what it's like in the real world, by the way, like in the
Correct.
business world. It's only in
Correct.
the it's only in the camp world or like these small business kind of small-minded kind of people that are just like, oh no, I want this person here forever, right? We
Yeah.
want them to grow. And it's easy for us to say because we were one of those people once, right?
That's
And
right.
Keith Klein was one of those people once, right? And Jeff Ackerman was one of those people once. So they all saw that and gave us that opportunity to do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Greg, just see, as a musician, I understand exactly what what you're saying about the rejection and all that kind of thing, and the attitude that sort of life is a little bit of a lottery, and you got to be in it to win it, you know, kind of thing. So, can you talk a little more, Greg, about specifically of how you got to be sitting in the captain's chair, though?
Yeah, for sure. This was not the dream. You know, the dream to be was to win a Tony Award on Broadway one day, which is yet to happen. But for me, I loved camp so much that I would just go back to camp every summer. And I mentioned this earlier. My mom at some point taught me that the only way to be successful at a job is to make yourself indispensable. So that is what I would do. I would go to Elmwood every summer and I would figure out ways, even though I taught drama, that somehow I was going to be the person who was going to make food service work for this camp, or I was going to be the person who was going to figure out dismissal better than anybody else. And I had a remarkable director and a remarkable mentor, and he saw that in me. And he would just keep giving me a little bit more. You know, every summer I would get a little bit more, not a little bit more money, but a little bit more responsibility. And every summer, somewhere in April or May, I'd have a job and I'd think to myself, you know what, it's warm outside. I want to go back to camp. I'd call and he would take me back. And then at a certain point, I knew this is what I wanted to do. But there was no full-time job. So I think very similar to Sam, I was given an opportunity to be at camp during the summer, but oversee our staff orientation. Certainly not a full-time position, but I did that. And then I did 10,000 other things during those 5 or 6 years. And then eventually I got hired full-time. And I remember thinking, this is amazing. I made less money actually when I was hired full-time because I wasn't doing 15 other things to, support my business. But I used to do trainings at other camps and I would do all of this stuff to make the job work. When the directors, Jeff and Bobby, decided to retire, there was an opportunity to purchase and become the directors of the camp. That's about 13 years ago.
Andy, can I add one quick story? My first summer at Laurel, I was a division head. And after that summer, I typed a letter to Keith, the owner, of what my idea was to create a new position at camp that I felt was needed after being there for one summer as a 22-year-old. I told this seasoned camp director and owner what he needed to do to make his camp better. And it was to create a new position, and I would be the one to fill that position. So here's what you're clearly missing. You have no idea how to do this, and here's what you should do.
That's awesome.
And I should be the one to do it. So he go ahead, Greg, you have a comment?
No, Sam,
No,
that's my story. I'll never forget. I sat at a retreat with a bunch of other camps with Jeff in the middle of winter, and I heard it was Rolling Hills Day Camp had a program director. And Elmwood didn't have a program director. So I wrote this whole letter to Jeff and I said, you need a program director and I'm going to take this job. And he let me do it.
Well, like what's great with Keith said, Sam, you may be right. All those things could happen at camp. We're not creating a new position. I'm going to give you position A, and you can do all those things on top of these other responsibilities. And if you want to do that, then you can show value. So I took the job as the assistant program director, Greg similar. And then all the things I had on my list of things that should go on that do not fall under the jurisdiction of the assistant program director, I still did. So to your point earlier, it's working 7 a.m. to midnight every day without fail and showing that you need me, I'm there to do it. Can I add one more quick story?
Yeah, no,
Keep rolling.
Sorry. One more.
The tape is rolling, Sam. The tape is rolling.
This is I remind Keith of this story. So I was the assistant program director. It's my second summer, and there were 4 of us on the program team. 2 throughout the summer quit, so it was myself and one other. the program director, his deal at camp was after visiting day, he went up to the Adirondacks. He had a house there for the rest of the summer. So it's my second summer at camp, my first summer in the program office. For the last 3 weeks, I was the only person in the program office. So I was writing the program, I was doing the daily newsletter, I was setting up special events, so literally it was 7 a.m. to midnight. So the second night that I'm now the program department, I'm closing down the evening program, and Keith comes up to me and goes, so you're the program staff now? And I said, I guess so. He goes, yeah, try not to mess it up. Thanks,
Yeah.
thanks,
Well,
Keith.
listen, it comes down to, like you said about Greg's mom said, is make yourself indispensable.
That's it. You want
Plain
me
and
to
simple.
set up evening program and break it down? Done.
Right.
You want me to drive the golf cart and pick up people? Whatever you need.
Right. And also what Greg said too, it's like, and be prepared to get paid like crap at first too, because you have to prove yourself, in order to get that. So when I was initially hired to be a full-time camp professional, I was called an intern first, and I was paid $24,000, and I just had to suck it up. And I had been making $40,000 as a teacher, plus teaching private lessons on the side, plus working at camp in a leadership role in the summer. And I was just like, you know what? I mean, fortunately, my wife had a good job at the time. I said, I'm going to suck it up and give it a whirl. You just have to take that risk and jump in the deep end.
And for young people to get in, you have to jump in the deep end, find the right organization, go for the summer, show that you're indispensable, and then know that just because you do it doesn't mean you're getting a full-time job in September. It might take time, but you got to be fully committed. You can't have your toes in the water. You got to be in the deep end.
Yeah.
And I do believe that making your voice known and what you want is actually something that I think people are better at today than certainly we were 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
And nothing makes me happier when people come and say, this is the kind of work that I want to do. And my answer is, okay, that can't happen tomorrow, but I would love to be a part of helping you figure out that path. And by the way, whether that's camp or something else, completely.
And Greg, it may not be at Elmwood, right? You'll connect them somewhere else and say, listen, 100%. You're amazing. We have nothing here, but I got my friend Andrew, my friend Jeff, or my friend Bob, whatever it is, and let me connect you with them.
And I also think that in this industry, which we know is growing, there are a lot of positions out there. It's just a matter of helping people find them, and that's a role we all play, which I think is great.
Yeah. And we've said it, all three of us have said it. It's a who you know game too. There's no doubt about it. You got to put yourself out there. And it's hard if you're an introvert, but you got to do it. You got to play that game. And some of the people that we know who are great connectors, by the way, are our friends at AM Skyer. Oh, is that a segue?
Look at
yes,
that.
It is. AM Skyer, the leading
no
insurance.
better connector than Jeff, Amy, and Henry Skyer.
Seriously. AM Skyer is the leading insurance and strategic partner for many of the finest camps in America. AM Skyer partners with camps to provide public relations, legal, medical, behavioral support, and more. Experience the AM Skyer difference, all right, at amskyer.com. So guys, when you call AM Skyer, which is usually in moments of slight distress to great distress, right? Tell our listeners how comforting it is. Like when Johanna Bush answers the phone, right, or whoever.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And I'll also tell you, because I oftentimes am just impatient, I just call Amy or Jeff directly, and it's amazing. They will then tell me exactly what I should be doing.
We might have to edit that part out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You'll take that out.
Not everyone has Amy and Jeff's cell phone numbers that you could get to.
Right,
Maybe they call the direct number.
I will say that it is amazing to not have to sit on hold when you call, and that somebody answers the phone and they always know who you are. And I think that's remarkable. They know who you are, they know your history, they know your story, and they are always willing to help.
Yeah. And Alan Cooper, I mean, they have so many incredible staff. If you have a legal issue, you don't have to go hire an attorney. You call Alan Cooper, and it gets back to you within minutes or hours.
I have absolutely saved tens of thousands of dollars of legal bills.
Without a doubt about
it.
I send everything for Alan to review, and he's incredible at understanding our industry and giving you good feedback and options.
Yep. So for over 100 years, people, this is a family business. Okay, there's great grandparents and all that kind of stuff. Experience the AM Skyer difference. Learn more at amskyer.com. All right, so now back to the reason that we thought that we would have this podcast, which is transitioning leadership, which is hard, right? The first experience I had with that is when the Applebaum Group sold to Jay Jacobs and crew. and Jay came in, and he had just had great success. He taken over Timberlake, where he had gone to. Then he took over at Tyler Hill. Then he had taken over at Timberlake West. And I was like, well, so how does this work with this whole thing? And he's just like, Andy, there is just no great way to do this. Like, you know, he's like, I went into one place and I was like Mr. Tough Guy, and that didn't work out. I came to the next place, I gave everybody raises, that didn't work out. He's just like, you just have to sort of feel your way through with this. And then, you know, I realized that this is a science. Like there's great books and stuff about transitioning leadership, because you're dealing with human emotions, right? I mean, that's what we do as camp directors. That's what we do as, you know, as leaders, is deal with the human frailty all the time, right? And it really gets heightened. The sensitivities get heightened during the situation. So I want to start with Gregg first, because Gregg, he mentioned this guy that mentored him and gave him the opportunity to buy in and all that kind of stuff. And this guy is literally a legend of camp now. All right, he is officially deemed that. He's got his like certificate on his wall. So I could only imagine how daunting that would be to step into his shoes.
Yeah, it was pretty daunting. I remember, I tell this story often. It was after the summer, right? The announcement had been made, and we had our first leadership team meeting in October. And 25 people, we set up the chairs, everything was going good, and I was fully prepared for the meeting. And I sat down and I looked up at people who I had worked with for years and had been honestly my mentors, many of them, if not all, older than me at that point, in many ways more experienced than me at that point, and I freaked out. I was terrified. I really was, and
Wow.
because I'm me, and I can you know always put myself down pretty quickly. You know, I just shared. I am terrified. This is a terrifying experience. Now, I had the great benefit that many of them were my close friends and truly in my corner, and people really wanted to see Elmwood succeed. But it took me 7 or 8 years to not feel like I was leading somebody else's camp. It really
Wow.
took a long time for me to get into the position where I felt like this was really mine and my partner Hillary's camp. So it was really it was a journey, and I will tell you, it started to happen before the pandemic, but the pandemic was probably the biggest driver, where you know you were now running something completely different, and I was able to prove that we were able to do that both in 20 and then 21, and that is when I really felt like, okay, I have my sea legs under me. Yeah, it was a bit of a journey.
Well, that's really unbelievable. So what were there any particular things that you did that stick out when okay, so here you now have the it's your responsibility now. Were there things that you did to ingratiate yourself to the camp families, to the staff, like things like that? Anything
Yeah, for
intentional with
sure.
that?
The first thing that we did is we called every camp family, and we made it a mission that we were going to reach them. It wasn't we were not just reaching. We were not just going to leave a message. It was really important that we hit every family, and we did the exact same thing with every staff member.
And
But that actually was
for
easy.
our listeners, we're talking about 600 families or something, or 500
Yeah, no,
families. Like it's
it
a
was a
lot of
lot of phone
people.
calls. It
Yeah,
was a lot of phone calls.
yeah.
But in many ways, that part was not the hard part. It was once camp was open, and that summer was 2013, and it was walking around feeling like I have to make decisions regardless of how people will judge me in those decisions. You know, will Gregg make that decision better or worse than Jeff would have made that decision? Because the decision had to be made. So, and I would constantly remind myself, and I actually looked back at my notes beforehand because I read everything down. I could have been plagued by those decisions, and sometimes I was. But if I didn't make the decision at all, that was going to just, you know, go terribly.
Yeah, well,
So I
we
think
all know
that was
the easiest decision to make is no decision.
for sure. And so I would really consciously remind myself, I had this mantra that I say to myself every morning, that I don't have a choice. I now have to make this decision. So that was one thing. The other big thing that for me was significant was saying, am I doing this whatever change, whatever decision I was making, am I doing this because I'm trying to make myself feel like a camp director, or am I doing this because I really believe this is right for the camp? And by the way, that's a fine line. I can give like a really specific example. We wanted to change a silly thing like how we were going to do Arrival, and it was just something that I believed so strongly in my heart was right for so long. But at a certain point, I really thought, A, is it that important? And B, is it just something that I'm doing because I want to show everyone I'm the camp director? And I came down to the fact that I think I'm doing it just because I want to show everybody that I'm the camp director. But then there were other times that I made choices that I really believe was right, and the team would follow on with me. I All I did for the first 2 years was work on my relationships with the leadership team, the families, and the staff. That was it. Nothing else mattered. And I think the other thing I did, I will share. I would tell these former directors very clearly. Didn't always wasn't always These were not always easy conversations.
No.
How much time they could actually spend at camp. So we went into this with a very prescribed agreement because otherwise, people are told,
Yeah.
who do I go to? And
Well, and they're
that was an
beloved
important piece
figures.
for me.
They're the kind of people everyone's just going to hug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was another huge thing for me as well.
Wow, that is so interesting. I love the way that you were able to take a distance on that and say, like, is this the right decision for the camp? Is this right? Or am I doing this because of my, ego, really, right? And it's because I think that anytime that people get promoted, right? If a sidekick counselor gets turned into a group leader, right? If a person becomes an assistant director, like you see what happens, like their chest gets puffed out and they get this confidence, and then it's all of a sudden like, you need to listen to me because I'm in this role now. Like they forget that you have to prove yourself. And I just love that you articulated and said that you just focused on the relationships of those three major stakeholders, right? Because that is what it's all about, right? You can't just be telling people what to do. You can't just be decreeing things, right? It has to be in concert with everybody. It has to be in agreement with everybody. You got to get the buy-in, and they have to respect that you're doing it because of the right reasons.
And I'll actually say when I started to go awry a little bit about this, when enrollment became really strong, so 15, 16, 17, we had a couple of really good years. It is very easy to let that ego win again. I can even think of times where I went a little too far to make certain decisions because I felt like I got this. And having to remember to pull yourself back and say, you know what? This is not about the fact that we were able to enroll 6 campers faster than the neighboring camp. This is really about continuing to make this a place that mattered for kids. So I'm constantly reminding that of myself because ego wins sometimes, and it's important to not let that happen.
Yeah, that is awesome. I appreciate your candor with that. That is super. One last thing I want to talk about with Elmwood is that I know from my relationship with Jeff that you guys have always had tenuous relationships with your neighbors. At Gregg's camp, Gregg and Hillary's camp, the neighbors are literally encroaching on the fence line, like all around them. I don't know when it was built 100 years ago. There might have been nobody there. It might have been farmlands, but now there's families. And I remember one story that Jeff had told me where, a family was all irritated just because if they looked out the window at some point, like, they might see a kid like get to the top of the zip line, kind of thing, 6 times a summer or whatever, and call the police or whatever. So how did you reach out to the neighbors? How did you ingratiate yourself to the community?
Yeah. Well, if you want to ever do a podcast just about neighbors, Andy, I could have give you like 6 hours worth of stories.
Yeah.
But I will say at the beginning, it was actually really easy because there was so much hatred toward Bobby and Jeff that all of a sudden it was like, well, we don't hate you as much, so that was helpful. We met with every neighbor. I will now tell you, I'm probably just as hated as Jeff and Bobby were 10 years ago.
Well done, Greg. Good work.
Reality,
Good work.
Thanks, I'm proud of that. The reality is that on a 5.5-acre camp with 500 plus children, you are a nuisance, and so I really try to recognize how much of a nuisance we are, and do everything that I can to work with the town and the neighbors to make them happy. But sometimes you just can't. And you know, I will say, that also progress in any way, shape, or form scares communities. So, you know, when a camp does a new facility piece, the fear is, well, they're going to add 300 more children. I often want to say, if you've seen Elmwood, where would 300 more children go? They're afraid of that, and so it was a big deal. I was very lucky in that in the beginning I had a pretty good run with the neighbors, by the way, it would be a really great subject for another podcast because there's a lot of good stuff in there.
Oh, absolutely. No doubt about it. So what
Greg,
are
I'm
the
sure all your neighbors are listening to this, so
what
be
are their
kind.
That's right.
what are their biggest complaints? Is it the traffic on the street? Is it the noise?
Well, this summer the traffic was the big thing. So yeah, and that comes in waves in terms of when people want to care about it. But traffic was a huge factor because they're really concerned about the amount of vehicles that come in and out of the property every day and so forth. The noise. We do a lot of evening programming. So, you know, look, and I actually 100% believe that many of their complaints are valid. So we really try to work with them as much as possible. Unfortunately, I think just sometimes what happens is there are neighborhood associations that become very powerful. So while we actually have a good relationship with several of our neighborhoods, our neighbors, it's really the neighborhood associations that make this a little more
Are
challenging.
you allowed to be a part of the neighborhood association?
What we are not allowed to be a part of the neighborhood association. We do, however, meet once a year with for anybody who wants to come. We invite them over to camp. We do like a big meeting. I share with them all of the stuff and
Good,
so
that's what I
forth.
was looking
You know,
for.
and it's we have such a great relationship with a handful of neighborhoods, a handful of neighbors. Our police department. Luckily, one of our neighbors is actually the fire department. So like, there's so much good stuff. But it's a tough 8-week summer, and I spend a lot of time just answering their phone calls and so forth. I'll never forget in the pandemic summer. It was 20, and you know, in 2020 you felt like you were doing heroic
God's
work.
work.
Exactly.
God's work. And so the way that we would do parent pickup, because we had to be distanced, is we had this megaphone where we would call out numbers, and we don't often do that. And every day this neighbor would call and complain about it. And I am known for actually not having a temper. I am very even. I really don't. And she's calling. I heard 43. I heard her just say 43. And I said, lady, we are doing God's work. And I hung up the phone. So that was not my finest moment. But other than that, we do okay.
Holy mackerel. All right. So before we go on and talk to Sam, we have to give a shout out to our friends at CRS, Commercial Recreation Specialists. How awesome are these guys? Yes, they are the fine purveyors of the best recreation solutions to keep camp going strong, right? Whether it's the little Prime go-karts, it's the Zoom flumes. You got I mean, what do you guys use? You guys use the pedal boats with your feet, or the power?
I use the pedal boats with their feet, and we use pedal carts to run our go-kart track.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, these guys are middlemen, right? They find these awesome products and they bring them to us, and they understand how our camps work and run. And, you know, places like, you know, these two guys with their daycares, they have a lot of little kids, and they have a lot of little kid stuff there. So I endorse them highly. Check them out at
Andy, their shade structures. Their shade structures are awesome. So
their shade structures are real. I mean, like, if you want to go and buy the real ones and have them last for a while, yes, they are awesome, because they build them for municipalities, to put on top of their playgrounds and stuff like that. So check out their website at CRS4rec. That's a number 4.com. CRS is serious about fun. All right, Sam. So tell us the story of Candy Mountain.
Candy Mountain. So our story is a little bit different than Greg's, because my wife and I did not grow up at the camp. We didn't work at the camp. We were at Sleepaway Camp together, and then the word kind of got out that this camp was available, called Candy Mountain at the time. So my wife and I came and worked with the old owners for a summer. So that was a really unique experience, because no one on staff knew why we were there. They just knew that we were this, a young couple that came in. My wife was 9 months pregnant with our son.
Oh my goodness.
So she was in the office. And the greatest, you guys have both been here, our office they built it as a greenhouse. So it was all windows on the ceiling. So in the summer, it was 180 degrees for adults in there. And in the winter, it was like 10 degrees. So my wife,
sweat lodge.
Yep, my wife was in the office with ceiling fans and fans all around her. And neither one of us had, back in the day, neither one of us had titles. So I was just at camp. And so I was introduced as Sam. And everyone who had been there forever was like, what the hell is this guy doing? And they're like, and Herb and Ruth were the owners, like, he's just going to help.
Research.
So that's it. So what did I do? I spent all day with a little pad taking notes all day of all the things that we wanted to change, because it was 30 years ago, it was an extremely popular, top-notch camp. And as the old owners got older, the program didn't change, the facility didn't change, the leadership didn't change. So many of the people that were there had been there for a very long time, were very set in their ways. I was telling a story today at lunch that some of the division heads also were educators, and they had consulting jobs. So during the day, they would be on their phone working for their other job while at camp. So they would leave the dining hall, leave all their kids to go consult for something else. So that summer was a fascinating experience to be able to just kind of be a fly on the wall. And both of you know me well. I'm not a sit in the back kind of guy. So without a real job title, I got my hands in everything.
Before you go on, I just want to throw out there to all those pipeline complainers out there, right? There are lots of camps right now being run by people who need to get rid of them in the next 10 years, right? And those are the kind of people you need to start conversations with.
Yeah.
All right.
And different than Greg, when we came in after that summer, first of all, the name Candy Mountain is great if you're 3 or 4. It's not so great if you're 11.
In the 1960s.
Correct. And they would sing the Big Rock Candy Mountain. I don't know, do you guys know that song? Up on the Big Rock, and drink the whiskey is a line in the song.
And the logo, right? Did the logo have like
candy
canes?
Candy canes.
Oh yeah,
candy
it was like Candyland. Yeah, we just called it Candyland. That's what we called it.
Candy canes all over camp, the whole thing. So after that summer, it was clear to my wife and I from the leadership team those that we were going to want to keep at least for that summer, and those that we were not going to bring back. So that was, talk about transitions. I was 32 and I was firing people who were 50, 60, and 70 who had been at this camp for 15 or 20 years and telling them that they're not going to have a place back at camp. So that was, we were lucky in the sense that we got to build our team kind of from the beginning with people that we connected with over that summer and through our relationships, and had to kind of do a big cleaning house of those that weren't going to be on the bus. They didn't have the right seats.
Yeah, you were really lucky to be able to spend that summer there. My goodness.
Yes. No, it was, the idea of starting, and that's, as we talked earlier about how to start in this industry, you got to be there in the summer. The stuff you do year round is so not relevant to the summer. You got to be there in the summer to understand the pulse of the camp, the culture of the camp, the philosophy of the camp, and if it's the right fit for you. So,
and from an owner's perspective, if I'm looking to pass the baton, how you're going to handle the stress and the pressure, that's what I want to see from you.
Correct.
Right? Are you going to crumple up? Because, that's really that's the hard part of our job, is maintaining that. All right. You heard Greg, once in 10 years, he got angry because the number 46 lady, called, but you got to keep it together.
And it's not how you are week 1, right? It's how you are week 8 or week 9. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And we've all seen amazing staff who after the 3rd or 4th week are just done. Right? They have totally gotten all of their energy out because they've sprinted, they've given it their all. And those people are great, but they're not going to make it long term because it's a marathon, not a sprint. So that first summer was a research summer, and then a full transition. It was changing culture. It was changing the name. Talk about starting over. For the first 5 years or even longer, when people would tour Woodmont, they would go, "Oh, you're the old Candy Mountain." You're the old.
course,
We
of
were
course.
always the old. It was never understanding
So how
who
did
we
that
were.
take place? Talk to us about the rollout of the rebranding.
So this is a great story. So Herb and Ruth were the old owners, and like most camp deals, it's complicated. They lived at camp, so their actual like house is also the office. So when we took over in September, they were still living in the office because their house wasn't ready in Arizona yet. So and this is 17 years ago, so there's no Wi-Fi. It's a dial-up.
And everything there had been done on paper.
Correct.
Everything on paper.
Everything paper. So I would be giving a tour to a family, and Herb would come down the steps in sweatpants and like a half shirt, and he'd be scratching his belly, and I would say to this family, "So that's Herb. He was the old owner. Good morning, Herb. How are you?" And so in the summer, as we were negotiating, and we still weren't even totally set on the deal. We knew, Alicia and I knew the name had to be changed, but we weren't sure how they would take it because this was their baby. They built it up. We thought that it might be a deal breaker, that if they knew. So I was sitting with Herb one night, and I said, "Herb, how do you like the name Candy Mountain? Like, what do you think?" And he goes, "If it were up to me, I would have changed it 20 years ago." And I said, "Good, because we are planning on changing it." So the day, like, camp ended on August 15th. August 16th, there was a new sign up. We had already gotten all printed and done, and it was all rebranded, like literally the next day.
The 2000, the next registration forms had the logo.
Correct, all the logo. And then we were starting from scratch, right? Because we all know that when you're picking a camp, you're picking it based on the reputation, the directors, and no one knew us from a hole in the wall. Yeah. Even though we were there in the summer, we weren't. Our titles were irrelevant. So it was really just starting to build a culture, and not so dissimilar to Gregg, where he said it took time. I don't think Woodmont hit its stride until weeks, year 5, 6, 7, 8. Because at the beginning we were running we didn't know what we wanted to run. We were taking from all of our past experiences and using those to run camp. And so we weren't really running our own camp. We were running pieces of all of our mentors' camps and using all of their language and verbiage and papers until we could really find, our footing. And that took time for sure.
Yeah, when I was at North Shore Day Camp, we had multiple owners, like sort of like our Southwood situation. And one summer would be like the Elmwood version of it. And the next year would be like the Harbor Hills version of it. It's just like, you have to find what your song is.
Right. How you identify and what culture you're going to build, and your team. The first year we added 1 or 2, but there were still a lot of Candy Mountain folks. And even though they bought in, they still liked the old way. And we made some drastic changes. We didn't allow cell phones. Some crazy things. We stopped serving hot dogs every day for lunch, which, kids.
Hey, there's still camps that do that. There's still camps that do that.
Listen, it's fine, but kids that eat 5 hot dogs a day, I just don't think it's good for you.
I think 5 hot dogs a week's probably not good personally, but yeah.
I'm going out on a limb, Andy. I'm saying 5 hot dogs a day is not good for your diet.
He was trying to remain politically correct there. He was trying to toe the line.
We had staff. We changed one of our policies. Many of the staff we felt didn't dress appropriately. There were a lot of like skimpy bikinis at Candy Mountain. So one of our policies, it's a tankini or a one piece. If you're at work, you're there to work. And we had lifeguards who did not return because of that policy change. They said, if we can't wear a bikini, we don't want to work. And I said, well, then it probably isn't the right place for you.
Yeah.
You probably should go work at a beach, right? Go work at a pool. Can you imagine? And by the way, of the people who didn't return, 2 of them were adults in their 30s and 40s who said that I won't work at the pool if you make me wear something other than a bikini.
I'd like to believe that it was about something larger for them, but perhaps I'd like to believe it was.
Gregg, I sat with them and said, is this really what the issue is? And they looked at me and said, yeah, because I'm like, okay.
Did they accuse you of body shaming? Because that's what I would have thought.
You know what it was? A lot of people said they thought that we were being bought by the religious. So that was
that was a threat at one point.
It was a big rumor.
Yeah,
big rumor. So
yeah, it was more than a rumor.
Yes, well, we were negotiating against them. Yeah.
Yeah. And then how did you bring them into the 21st century as far as like all the paperwork? Like this, like, did you just decide, you know what? We're just turning the page and we're starting with year 1? Or like, did you want to know? Like, don't you want to know who your alumni are? Don't you want to like follow up with like,
Day one, it was we transitioned to an online database, one that I'd experienced with for years at my sleepaway camp.
You can say that. We talked
Camp
about
Minder,
that.
sorry, I've been a Camp Minder camp for since their inception. I was one of the
Right.
first
Sam
camps
and
to
I
start.
are originals. We're originals.
Correct. We're the OG Camp Minder people. So I called Dan and said, listen, we have nothing. How do we get this data at least into Camp Minder? And then we had to type all of it into Excel and then upload it from Excel to Camp Minder. Days of work of getting all of that in. But yeah, Andy, people who were there 2 or 3 summers before, we just didn't have the wherewithal to get it in. So we would just do that summer, spend it all, upload it in, and then go from there. But it's so daunting, and I mean, bus routes, they had paper, there was no way to track billing. When you ask them how many kids they had in camp, they're like 800. Oh, by the way, his cousin was there for a day. We charged him a day rate. He
Right.
paid
Right.
$45 in camp for the day.
Right. And one of the reasons why the deal didn't go through with the other folks is because there was no proof of how much money, how many kids, or anything. They were just buying this they were buying, like, I don't know, something. But
yeah, and we were stupid enough to say, you know what,
oh,
we'll figure it.
No, you took risk. We're going back to risk.
We took a giant
going
risk.
Back to risk. You said, here's this great place in this great location and with great people running it, and we can make this work.
We'll figure it out. And
we're
then
gonna put our ass on the line, make it work.
I think 2 years later, the economy collapsed, so that was fun. That was
right.
That was good to make it through that risk of how you're going to pay your bills. But look, to Gregg's point earlier, it's all we did. We worked 7 days a week. Our life was camp. We were raising an infant, and we would spend 7 days a week at camp. And if you wanted to tour, my answer was yes. Are you available Saturday at 6? Yes. Sunday morning at 8? Yes. There was never, my answer was not no. I did not have the ability to say no, because if they didn't tour, if I said no, my fear, and Gregg still feels this way, is that they're going to go tour someone else and then sign up, and I've lost out.
Yeah, well, you guys are in a highly competitive area, so it's not really, that's more than a fear. That's sort of reality.
Yeah.
With a staff person too, which is even a bigger deal these days.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love the metaphor of the infant. Absolutely, raising an infant. That is what it's like, except it's this giant, 40-acre infant.
Yeah. And Gregg said it. I think the way that we made decisions is what's right for Woodmont. Woodmont and Elmwood and Liberty Lake, they're entities. They're living beings. And when you're making these decisions, it's not what's right for Sam or for Gregg or for Andy, but what's right for Woodmont. And then that's right for the families and for the staff and for everyone else. And so you make difficult decisions, and then it is your baby. Right now, we were raising, a 17-year-old that is fun and exciting, and we can do stuff that the first 5 years we were putting all of our money into septic tanks and pipes. You can't sell that.
And by the way, that can change. What's right for Woodmont, what's right for Elmwood, what's right for Liberty Lake, it could change in 2013 to 2017. Families change, and I actually, that is for me, one of the biggest challenges was, change is critical, in order to continue to be relevant to families today. And I remember, in the early years, we were a camp that was pretty resistant to change. That was going to be my big thing. We were going to have to figure out a way to stay relevant to our families, and that was only going to be possible by making some small and some really significant changes.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to what Sam said about the commitment level and the work-life balance. So we're going full circle now. We're going back to the pipeline.
To the beginning.
And because it really is something that you need to consider. It is really, the grass is always greener, right? When I worked as a teacher, and I could work and get off at 3 o'clock and then do a side hustle and then get vacations off and all those kind of things. And yeah, I was a band director. I had my big winter concert. That was rough. Okay. But it was nothing like running a summer or summer camp. And I was listening to the Scott Galloway podcast, which I highly recommend. And he was talking about startups and such, and saying how that if you decide that you really want to do this, you want to be a small business owner, right? You want to bring something up from nothing to something. You really have to just understand that you're not going to be able to watch that 4-season Netflix series anytime soon. Plain and simple, right? You're going to be working 7 days a week. It's going to compromise your relationships. It's going to compromise everything that you do. and your business will become successful, hopefully,
Yeah.
and it'll pay off. But you have to understand that. And that is something that for the young folks right now, they're trying to break in. That's what we're talking about. We need to see you in action. We need to see if you have that commitment level, because we don't think it necessarily grows on trees, right? It never did. And in this
Right.
day and age where everything comes to people so easily, right, where you can literally just apply and get a job on your phone in 30 seconds, this is old school. This is old school, roll your sleeves up kind of stuff.
Andy,
And
one
by
of
the
my
way,
least-
Andy, Greg, you'll go right after. I
Yeah.
still work 7 days a week. The only difference
yeah.
17 years later is that now I'll tell families, here's when I'm doing tours. So
Yeah.
I'm still here every weekend, but it's not, now it's around my kids' baseball schedules and my life. And so
And by the way,
I'm not
that's only because enrollment's good right now. If it wasn't, I'd be skipping my kids' baseball game.
Tell me when to be here.
Yeah.
I will be here when you do.
And that is a question that I get asked all the time. Well, great, Greg, you can't tell me that this is more important than raising my children, or this is not more important than the fact that I have to go to this holiday dinner. And my answer is, it's not more important. They can both be important at the same time. There is a way to do two things at once. You know, it may mean that you have to go to the holiday dinner late, and I actually think there's a valuable message in that sometimes. You know, there are going to be extenuating circumstances in life, weddings, funerals, the things that just happen, you know, once every so often. But for the most part, kids' games and dance recitals and all of these things, they're very real, and they're in our lives all the time. There is a way to make everything a priority at once. It's complicated. And for me, and I've had these conversations with my own children multiple times, you know, all of these great things that we want to be able to do in life and be a part of, we have to be able to work and love our family time and say goodbye to us sometimes. And it's all possible if we're open and we talk about it. And I think it doesn't have to be an either or. It can be a both.
And look, you take our good friend Jeff Gould and partner. He's on the road, 150 days a year. So he's missing track meets, and when he's home, and he's there and he does everything he can. But you know, he's in France, he's in Belize, but you know, he's all over the place. You know, if you watch him on Facebook, you don't know where he wakes up. But he's a great parent, and he's dedicated, and you can't do it. You can't. The balance is there.
I'm in a million things. I have so many obligations, and I am the king of leaving early, and I'm the king of showing up late. But I get there.
That's right.
I get there.
Yeah.
You know, except with my own camp. I don't compromise that.
You may not be the king in leaving early. I may take that title, but
yes. Historically famous. All right, guys, this has been great. This is good. This is like an all-timer, this podcast.
Wow.
I think we should actually run this thing on the camp owners podcast. It should be run on their feed also, because it was so relevant for that. I'll ask Howie. I'll give him
my first podcast, and I get to be on 2 feeds.
Maybe. I'm not promising you anything.
I'm just saying that would blow my mind.
No, I thought there was a lot of great relevant stuff here. So I want to thank Greg, and I want to thank Sam for their time, because Sam is literally running off to pick up his son from baseball practice.
Baseball tonight.
And we want to thank the Go Camp Pro team and AM Skyer, commercial recreation specialist, for allowing us to bring this podcast to you. If you like what you hear, you should subscribe to the Day Camp Pod on your favorite podcast platform. Check out the show notes from all our episodes at daycamppodcast.com, as well as contact info for the show, for Sam, for Greg, and for Sam Thompson. We wish her the best, and she'll be back next week. So thanks for listening and making yourself a better Day Camp Pro. We'll be back soon with another episode of the Day Camp Pod.